What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Recently, I talked about a Stephen King short collection of short stories, I guess, Cycle of the Werewolf, and I mentioned that a long time ago, back around 2007 or so, I read a book that put me off of reading Stephen King, and that book was called On Writing. A little bit of background on this. My very first semester in college, I saw a copy of this book in the university bookstore. I had spent the previous 2 years of high school reading almost exclusively Stephen King books. I read Eyes of the Dragon, It, Salem's Lot, and all of the Dark Tower books. And that took me about 2 years, and then I saw this book and I thought, okay, I'll go ahead and get this and read it. And reading it put me off of reading anything else by Stephen King. I was very upset by what I read, and I didn't want to read anything else by this author ever again. And then I think I must have gotten rid of the book because lately I have been going through other books on how to write, how to hone your craft as a writer. I see myself as one day becoming an aspiring writer, and I thought I needed to look at what different experts say on how best to approach I guess, the craft of writing. And I was like, you know what? I should probably give On Writing another read. And then I couldn't find it anywhere. So I must have gotten rid of my copy that I bought over 15 years ago, or about 15 years ago. And then my mom found this copy, and she had a coupon. It was a used bookstore in South Carolina, and then she was able to get this book for free. So this is my second copy of On Writing, and I read it, and I don't hate this as much as I did when I was in college. There are some things about it that I don't agree with, but there are some good things about this book. For one, this is like 60% memoir, and then maybe 70% memoir, 30% about the craft of writing. And I will say the memoir part of this book is excellent. Stephen King does an amazing job keeping my attention as he's going through these different episodes of his life. Near the very beginning of the book, he says that there's a lot of his life he just doesn't remember, and that's probably because of the cocaine that he did in the 80s, but I found myself wishing that he did remember more of his life so that he could tell me about more stuff that happened to him, because I was always engaged no matter what he was talking about in the memoir half of this book, whether it was his babysitter who was being really mean to him and locked him in a closet, or whenever he started writing when he was in high school and how that came about. Even, this is going to sound macabre, but even like when his mom was dying, he still is able to keep the reader on the hook, and I was very impressed by that, and I just wanted, I never wanted him to stop talking about his life. And then he gets to the part where he finds out how much money he's going to make from Carrie, which was his first really big hit. And then it kind of just stops. He kind of hits a little bit of stuff that happened after Carrie. He talks about how he is an alcoholic, but also he was abusing cocaine, and how that nearly ruined his life and kind of nearly broke apart his family. He hits on that a little bit, talks about how that tied in with some of his fiction, how the main character of The Shining is very much a mirror of Stephen King when he was kind of at his worst, and he talks about that a little bit, and all of that is fascinating. And then he gets to the parts where he's talking about the craft itself. And there are, according to George R.R. Martin, there are two types of writers. There are architects and there are gardeners. An architect has a solid plan for whatever it is they are going to write, and they more or less stick to that plan. It's a blueprint. And they might change a little bit here and there. When you have a blueprint for a house, that's the basic structure of the house, but then you might later decide we're going to add a garage over here on the side, and that might not have been part of the initial blueprint. Or you might decide, at first you thought you were going to paint the house blue, and then you decide I'm going to paint it green or whatever. And so things may change from your ideas in the initial blueprint, but basically the structure that you had in mind from the beginning is going to remain the same, and that is if you are an architect. And then you have gardeners, which is what George R.R. Martin is, and that's also what Stephen King is. And a gardener doesn't have a plan. They plant a seed, they water the seed, they nurture it, maybe they put good soil around the seed, they have stuff that you can buy at Lowe's to really help plants grow, but they don't know what kind of seed it is. Is it an apple tree? Is it a peach tree? I don't know, what kind of shape is this tree going to be in when it is fully grown? They're just there to nurture this idea and let it go in whatever direction that it will go. And I myself, I am very much a type A personality. I feel like I have to be more of an architect in anything, not just creative writing, but anything. I feel like I need to have some kind of plan for doing what I do. And so this kind of disillusioned me whenever Stephen King was talking about how he didn't use these words that George R. R. Martin used, but he said he is very much a gardener. He talked about how he might have 200 pages on a manuscript, and if he's not feeling it, he'll just throw it away. And that kind of made me just like my eyes wide, and I was like, I can't believe it. I felt like this guy just kind of lucked into being one of the most successful writers of the last 100 years, and I was kind of baffled and upset that he kind of lucked into this. And that's not entirely true. Stephen King has worked very hard to get where he is, and he is the kind of guy, he could never work another day in his life. And I should point out, this book was written in like early 2000s. I want to say he started writing it in late 90s, and then he had to take a little bit of a break because he was hit by a car, and he does talk about that a little bit in his book also. But this was published sometime in the very early 2000s, and so I don't really know how much has changed for Stephen King in the last 20 years, but he could probably never write another story for the rest of his life and live comfortably off of what he has made on everything else he's written, but he just loves writing, and he wants to keep doing it. And so I appreciate that, that he isn't just coasting on his laurels. Some of his very early works, he had written a few of the Bachman books, and then those hadn't been published, and then after he hit it really big, after Carrie, he doesn't talk about this in On Writing, but I've heard this elsewhere, he published some of his earlier works under a pseudonym just to see if he still had what it took. Were people just buying his stuff because the name Stephen King was on it, or were they buying his work because it was good? And he wanted to find that out by publishing under a different name, and I appreciate that. He's not just trying to coast through and say, I'm Stephen King, I'm awesome, and I can do no wrong. He is still putting in the work. But then he talks about how he was like 500 pages into The Stand and he didn't know what to do, and then he said, I have an idea. Spoilers for The Stand. I have an idea. I'll just have a bomb go off, and it will kill like a third of my characters, and I had no idea what I was doing with any of them, and then that puts me on the path to finishing the story. And sometimes you can have a eureka moment, and it may not have been part of your idea from the beginning, but this just really felt kind of hackneyed to me. It really felt cheap. Lazy's not the right word, because like I said, Stephen King, I do believe he is a very hardworking man, but this just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and it still kind of does. Now, I'm not going to say that if you are a gardener that you are wrong and your approach is wrong, because whatever works for everybody is going to work for everybody. But for myself, I feel like having a little bit more of an idea of where the story is going is just the better approach for myself. And that's why looking at the writing portion of this, the portion that actually talks about here's how to be a better writer, I feel like it's not something that can apply to me, because Stephen King is coming from an entirely different angle than I am coming from. He is talking about this is how to be a better gardener writer, whereas his approach does not work for me. And so even reading this a second time and trying to have more of a level head about, well, maybe it's not as bad as I thought, I still feel like there's just not a lot about this in terms of approaching your craft as a writer that will really work for me. Now, he did have some good ideas. He talked about how when you're writing your story, first you need to have write with the door closed. That means you're just writing with yourself in the room. You are not writing with somebody else looking at what you're doing. You don't want anyone looking over your shoulder. You're just writing for yourself. And then after you finish that draft, then you can open the door and you can let people look at it, your beta readers, if you will, and then you can fine-tune it. He had a really great part in here where he talked about someone had given him some advice, saying the first draft, however long it is, your second draft needs to be the first draft but 10% shorter. So if you write a 1,000 page story, then your second draft needs to be 900. If you write a 1,000 word story, then your second draft needs to be 900 words. And that's really good advice. And there is some good advice in here, but overall, a lot of what Stephen King has here just didn't really work for me. He kind of hits a little bit on write what you know, and that is something that a creative writing professor I had, he hammered on that every single day that I had a class with him. Write what you know. You have to write from your own experiences. If you watch a movie and then you're basing your story on something that you saw in that movie, it's going to feel artificial. Write from real experiences that you had. Now, the problem with that is I've had a very boring life. I have like 2 stories that I can tell you that are entertaining, and after that, I've got nothing. And there's a good chance that nobody wants to read about a former English major who's now a librarian. I'm a very boring person. Nobody cares about my experiences. And when you look at Stephen King's work, and this is not a joke, like 80% of his stories feature a writer in Maine fighting the forces of evil, and Stephen King is a writer in Maine who has battled the forces of evil in terms of his addiction, and then it's like, oh, okay, he is definitely just writing what he knows. And there's nothing wrong with that, but then also you want to kind of shake it up a little bit. You don't want every story to basically just be the same, and that's not exactly true. You look at The Dark Tower, that's not about a writer in Maine. Not all of his stories are about writers, but when you can name like over half of them, and they're all kind of fitting in that same mold, I'm starting to think, okay, you've got some good advice, Mr. King, but maybe I need to go and listen to somebody else who's not just writing the same thing over and over. So I feel like I'm rambling here. It's really difficult for me to talk about this book in depth because there's quite a bit here that he covers. He does a really good job of covering a lot of material in a fairly short amount of time. For a Stephen King book, this is very short, and I felt like I burned through this pretty quickly. So if you are interested in writing, or even if you're not, if you just want to learn about Stephen King as a person, this is a great book to have. You should buy this, and then you can read it, and then decide for yourself if you want to keep reading once he gets to the part where he stops talking about his life. But even if you just want to know about him, definitely find this book and read it. It's a little old, older than I thought, from the early 2000s, but I still think this is worth having on your shelf. And then maybe this will give you some good pointers as a writer if you are interested in that kind of thing. So that's about all I have to say about on writing. I hope you guys like this video, and I will see you guys in the future with some more videos. In the meantime, have a great rest of your day. Catch you later.